Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Women's Leadership Initiative's Trailblazers and Changemakers webinar series. My name is Anu Sivaraman, and I'm an assistant professor of marketing. I'm here to represent the Learner Diversity Initiative today, spearheaded by Dr. Jennifer Joe. The Learner Diversity Council provides the learner college community the opportunity to understand and appreciate both the shared and unique backgrounds and talents that all of us have to offer. It is in this spirit that we are happy to partner with the Women's Leadership Initiative to bring to you today's event on Black leadership and the impact on the future of work with Secretary Hubbard. Here to tell you more about today's event is Amy Stengel, the Director of Programming for WLI. Amy?
Good morning, and thank you, Anu. We are so happy to have all of you here with us this morning as we bring this important conversation and honor Juneteenth along with the Black community and celebrate the emancipation of all of those who had been enslaved in this country. We're also very excited at the Women's Leadership Initiative to announce the launch of a podcast series called Hear Her Story, where we interview amazing women who've been trailblazers and changemakers in their lives and in their communities. And so we invite you to follow us on social media to hear more about this launch, which should be coming very soon. This morning, we're also on the Zoom webinar format, which, as you know, means that we cannot see or hear you, but you can see and hear us. This session has actually been pre-recorded due to some scheduling issues for Secretary Hubbard. So we invite you to place your comments in the chat and connect as always. We do actually intend to send the comments in the chat to Secretary Hubbard. If there's anything that you'd like for her to know or hear about, please feel free to put that in the chat this morning. And now I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, the Honorable Secretary Karryl Hubbard, who is the Secretary of Labor for the State of Delaware, who will be in conversation with my colleague, Lynn Evans, the Director of the Women's Leadership Initiative. Secretary Hubbard was appointed as Secretary of the Delaware Department of Labor on January 21st, 2021 by Governor John Carney. In that role, she oversees and manages divisions that provide diverse employment services to Delaware workers and employers. Prior to her current position, Secretary Hubbard held several roles in state government, including leadership positions with the Departments of Services for Children's Youth and Their Families, Health and Social Services, and Administrative Services. She also worked for the U.S. House of Representatives as a legislative assistant for Tom Carper. A lifelong Delawarean, Secretary Hubbard attended Dover High School, Hampton University, and Temple University School of Law. She lives in Wilmington with her daughter, Quinn. And now it's my pleasure to turn over the conversation to Lynn Evans and Secretary Hubbard.
Good morning, Secretary Hubbard, and thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar honoring Juneteenth.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
So before we dive into the topics, many topics at hand, I would love to hear more about your background, your journey that brought you to this role in public service.
Sure. Well, many, many years ago, I'm a native Delawarean. I was born and raised in Dover and attended Dover High School, attended Hampton University in Virginia, and then Temple Law ultimately. So my first job out of high school was the summer before college, and I worked in the summer feeding program, which was a program where during the week we would take lunch out to these distressed communities and serve the kids lunch basically. So that was my first position that I ever had as a part-time job. And I was really impacted by the communities that we served. I mean, I grew up in a relatively middle-class environment, and actually having to see folks who were impoverished was an eye-opening experience. And I really thought at that point I was committed to doing something to help, especially when you're working with children and seeing children in poverty. It is something that's very impactful, and it really makes you want to make a difference. So following that stint, I went to college and I majored in political science. And so Hampton University, if you don't know, it's a historically Black college, and it was founded in 1868. And I often think of it as a member of my family because my grandparents met there in 1922 and later married. My mother attended, my sister attended. So it's sort of been a lifelong institution for us. And so one of my thoughts about majoring at school was, what didn't I have to take? I was not a strong math student. And the one major that required only one math class was poli-sci. So that's how I ultimately ended up as a poli-sci major. And as you attend, in a very politically active department at a university, you become more of an activist. Attending an HBCU is very, very different than what I grew up with. But in many respects, it felt like home. It felt like my community. And there was a level of activism around politics that I developed through that role. So once I graduated from school, I knew I wanted to continue in politics. I had kind of dipped my toe into it a little bit, and I had the opportunity to graduate early. I graduated a semester early, and my plan was to go to law school and take that last semester to kind of hang out at home. My mother had other ideas, and she said, you're a poli-sci major, why don't you call the congressman's office and get a job? And, me thinking, they're not going to hire somebody for a semester. I called anyway, happened to get a call back and said, come on and start working for us. And so that began a 5-year stint in the office of Congressman Tom Carper. I started first as a congressional caseworker in his Wilmington office, and then I moved to the Washington office as a legislative assistant doing policy involving veterans, senior citizens, transportation, animal welfare. So I had a nice range of policy issues that I was able to delve into that role. So I, enjoyed working on the Hill very much. It was an exciting place to be. But between the traffic and the low salary, I knew that wasn't something I was going to be able to do forever. So that it was at that point that I decided to go to law school and complete my education. And once I graduated from law school, Tom Carper had become governor of Delaware. So that was when I first started in state government. And I've had a number of roles. I started as the director for the Division of Child Support Enforcement. Later became the Deputy Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Services. I then moved to the Children's Department, worked there for 8 years in administration. And then I moved about 4.5 years ago to the Department of Labor. So that's pretty much a thumbnail sketch of kind of how I got here today. Many experiences have, were the result of just good timing, good opportunity. And so it's been a great career. I encourage everyone who's interested to pursue a career in public service. I mean, there's nothing like being able to make a difference that you can see.
Well, it's interesting you say it was about timing and certainly your hard work, but you answered one of the questions that we usually ask, and it's like, what is that pivotal moment? Or what can people do? And you made a phone call and you reached out and you advocated for yourself, and think of what has followed. And it's really something I wanted to highlight, especially to younger people who are listening, is it can be the smallest action that will dictate, the future and future success. I love that. I really do. So as we celebrate Juneteenth today, one of the things that we wanted to highlight that it's often historically been overlooked is the impact of Black women in the political process and in public policy. And private corporations, the private sector has been able to quantify the benefit of diversity. But what does it mean to you in the public sector especially given your role in leadership now?
Sure. So, in my view, Black women have been important in so many ways, especially politically. When you think back to the civil rights movement, what comes to mind? Martin Luther King, Joseph Lowery, Malcolm X, Thurgood Marshall. But Black women were there doing the hard work, organizing, teaching, registering voters, all that trailblazing while still cooking, feeding people, holding down jobs, and taking care of children. You don't hear as much about the Dorothy Heights, the Shirley Chisholms, the Fannie Lou Hamers, but they were there in the trenches doing the work and didn't often get the recognition, but still they knew they were there for a bigger purpose, and so they did it, consistently supporting African American men, but certainly leading on their own.
And have you seen over your career the difference that it makes? I mean, can you point to something small and others maybe very impactful because of that diversity that perhaps wasn't the case in decisions that perhaps were made even 10, 20, 30 years ago, and how that changes now when we have diversity of thought?
I think the public sector has, I believe, for a long time been an open place for African Americans. I think some of the early, organizations did have African American leadership. So I think while the private sector really has done a good job of quantifying it and articulating the case for why it's valued, in many ways, I feel like the public sector just did it. And perhaps it was because the populations being served were, we were serving African-American families and other people of color who were in poverty. But I think those early experiences gave, sort of launched government a little bit ahead than the private sector.
Right, which is not always the case, or I don't think it's in our our mind's eye that is that government would be leading and on cutting edge. But I think you're exactly right. So one of the topics we wanted to cover today certainly is the impact of COVID on the workforce. It's massive. The impact on women is even more, and the disproportionate impact on women of color. But before we go into that topic, I think this is the time to recognize the work that the Department of Labor has done and continues to do. So I wondered if you wouldn't mind commenting on the work of the employees in the department and how you as a leader have managed, this hopefully once in a generation occurrence.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for acknowledging the team at the Department of Labor. While not typically thought of as essential personnel, our crew in the Division of Unemployment Insurance became essential personnel. And so these folks were unable to shelter at home, after surge, they continued to come to work. They had kids that they had to make arrangements for. They were fearful like everyone else. And so it was critical that we did our best to make the workplace feel as safe as we could. We purchased PPE, we purchased, gloves, wipes. We added on teams to come in and clean during the day so that the workplace was as safe as we could make it. The other thing we had to do was to continue to encourage them because, as you can imagine, we had a huge backlog of claims that we were trying to process, and people were angry, they were upset, they were, at one point we had 65,000 claims being, filed. And so it was just an overwhelming experience for our team. Prior to that, we would typically get about 6,000 to 7,000 claims a week. And then for it to explode the way it did, they were just not prepared for it. So, we had to continually, just say thank you, give them all the support we could, let them know that they were making a difference. These people really stood in the gap for families who would have been desperate without having any money coming in the door. So as difficult as that period was, I think our team has come through it strengthened. And, it's something that they accomplished and that they can feel very proud of, what they've accomplished for the people of Delaware.
So do you now see as a leader changes that you will incorporate? I mean, clearly there had to be an immense amount of flexibility on the part of you and your leadership team and folks at the department. Sort of any lessons learned, like maybe you'll reflect on this, in another year or so, but, is there something that you reflect on that has come out of this experience?
That is a very good question, and I don't feel like we're quite in the rearview mirror yet. Mm-hmm. We still have a huge backlog in our adjudication cases, and that is when somebody files for unemployment and you have an employer that says, well, they were terminated, so they're not eligible. So that has to actually go to somebody to adjudicate that case, and so we still have a backlog of about 10 to 11,000 of those that we're working through. So, we still feel like we're in the thick of it. I think the other issue that's cropped up and continues to crop up is fraud. We have fraudsters out there trying to use information. They're utilizing Social Security numbers that they've obtained from the dark web to try to apply for benefits on behalf of people who, living, dead, otherwise. So, we're still faced with a lot of challenges, but I do think some of the lessons learned will be valuable in moving us forward in terms of, remote work. We now know that we can, hold people accountable, get productivity out of them, even though they're not in the office. I think it's kind of been a big shift in a mindset. State government hadn't traditionally been a place where there was a lot of telecommuting opportunities. So I do think that will be an opportunity moving forward. When the pandemic first hit, we had to quickly pivot. We had to contract with a call center based in Utah so that we could, manage the volume of calls coming in. So we had to develop emergency procurement processes and ways to get things done quickly. So, we're still learning. When we get through this a little bit more, we're certainly going to do a hot wash of it all to figure out, what are the things that we need to retain? What can we learn? What do we need to discard now that we know better? Obviously, being able to interact with people through Zoom has been a time saver, and our ability to communicate through this medium has really expanded opportunities not only for us but for our clients. In the Division of Employment and Training, we've developed seminars, webinars, ways to give people training virtually so that they don't have to come into the office. And so we think there's some very valuable things that folks will take away from this.
Right. And so the bottom line is a please and a thank you go a very long way for people who are working around the clock under the most stressful conditions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, terrific. So I wanted to turn our attention to COVID-19. What else? And get your thoughts on, as we said, the disproportionate impact on women. How you think about that? Excuse me. How you think about your priorities, say pre-COVID, as a leader in this department, and now going forward. How has that changed now, as we hopefully emerge?
So I will say, early on, there was a disproportionate impact on African American women. African Americans represent about 24% of Delaware's population, yet 33% of all people filing for unemployment were African American. 75% of all people who lost jobs during the pandemic have a 12th grade education or less. So we know that educational attainment provides a hedge against job loss. But I also believe that women, Black women especially, need to think about work and occupational aspirations. I have an example in my own life. Years ago, my sister worked as a telephone operator for Bell Atlantic. And, periodically these men would come in off the trucks and talk with them. And what she learned was that these men were making about $75,000, $80,000 a year, where the operators were probably making in the low 30s. So, she and a number of her friends decided that they were going to become linemen and go out there and get on the trucks and be the ones who are climbing the poles and fixing, these telephone lines. So I think part of this is about exposure and exposing young women and middle-aged women to different careers that are out there. And so we need to do a better job here at the Department of Labor at letting folks know that there are training dollars available if they want to upskill, if they want to change careers and do things differently. So, that I think exposure is one thing. The other piece I think is supports. Many of us, we've got children, we've got families, we've got bills. So it's not easy to go from a waitressing job and take extra time to go back to school. So, we need to figure out how can we be more flexible with childcare hours. What kind of supports can we give them to help them sustain their families while they're able to skill up into other occupations. So, I think it's knowledge. The knowledge needs to be out there. The supports need to be there. And I think women need to help support one another. I know, especially, we also want to promote trades. Most women aren't in trades. We think of apprenticeships as a system of father to son occupations, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Employers are clamoring now for all folks. So, women should not limit themselves in what occupations they want to go into. They can get training through apprenticeships. So, again, we are engaging with many of the trade unions and the contractors, and they are actively looking for women, people of color, and to bring them into the fold. So they're great life-changing wages that are made, and I think it could really impact African American families if these women are able to upskill into these jobs that provide a living wage, more than a living wage.
And Secretary Hubbard, you touched on something there. You mentioned childcare. So we think about the support that families need, and usually childcare falls to the mother or women in the family, and that's a whole other conversation. That's something that's come out during the pandemic and for across all sectors of the population. But I think it's very notable what Delaware has done or did through the pandemic to keep daycare workers, to consider them essential and to keep them employed. Can you describe, for our audience, the actions that Delaware took along those lines?
Sure. Delaware was, obviously nationwide, we were facing a crisis where individuals, were unable to remain on the job because they had these, kids were learning virtually. So Delaware made a commitment through care dollars to support daycare centers so that they could remain open. And essential employees had an opportunity to place their children in these slots. It would have been a crisis had not these daycare centers remained open. I think it was, CARES dollars were flexible enough so that states could sort of craft the solutions that were best for them. And I definitely believe Delaware was in the forefront of allotting a lot of this money to daycare centers to ensure that essential services were being provided during this time.
Right. And I do think it's notable, we both know people in Dover who are advocating every day for daycare and pre-K, with multiple societal benefits, but to enable women to work and have a career, enable moms to work. And I hope that there is this understanding now and recognition of the state, the Department of Labor, working with elected officials on behalf of families. So it set us apart, I think, as a state in the actions that we were taking. So I wanted to take a moment here and bring in another member of the Women's Leadership Initiative team to join in our discussion. Gabby, if you could turn on your camera. Gabrielle Sherba is the newest member of our team. She is a rising senior and will graduate next year with a degree in English and sociology with a minor in women's studies. She is studying Black identity and culture. She is a social activist. She is an undergraduate researcher. And I guess because she really doesn't have much else going on, she's now joining our team. We always ask the busy people to join us. And we met Gabby and we're thrilled. And she is going to be working with us to expand our student program at the University of Delaware for students who identify as female, our SEND program. So Gabby, thank you so much for being here. And we wanted to bring you in this conversation. You have some great questions and point of view. So please.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to meet with you guys. And I definitely do want to, especially since this is a Juneteenth celebration, get to questions on financial freedom. But while you guys were talking, I was thinking a little bit more also about how we can incentivize Black women as well who are receiving unemployment benefits. What does that mean? What is that conversation about? And what is the Department of Labor doing for Black women who think it's more beneficial to receive these benefits as opposed to going back to work? And then I'd like to move to financial freedom.
Sure. I think it's a really complicated question. There's a lot of conversation around, getting people back to work and the fact that these unemployment benefits are a hindrance to that. Folks are staying at home, and these, employers can't find enough employees. So, there are a number of reasons why people choose not to look for work. And I must say, as of June 12th, the department recoupled the requirement to do a job search as a condition of receiving benefits. So when the pandemic first hit, we decoupled that. That's always been a rule that if you're on unemployment, you have to have a resume and job link, and you have to conduct a weekly work search. So because of the pandemic and jobs were shedding, we decoupled that requirement. It's recently been reinstituted. So people are starting to look for work again. And we've gotten, we have over 17,000 resumes in our system right now. So people are definitely looking for work. And I think people are ready to work. There have been barriers. There have been fear of COVID. There was, we now have vaccinations. School's now out, there's no more virtual learning, and summer camp is here, and children are going back to summer camps, daycares, and parents aren't required to help them with their education with remote learning. So I can't let this question go by without talking about the issue of wages. I mean, if somebody is able to remain at home on a benefit that provides them more than what they would make by working, that's a choice that an individual has to make. And so in my mind, the employer has to really take another look at compensation and, make sure that they're compensating employees in a way that makes them want to remain engaged in work. So it's a complex question. I see people want to work, they really want to get back to work, but they also need to be able to make a living wage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an awesome segue into what I want to talk about. I guess what I'm really thinking about today, as it is Juneteenth and we're celebrating freedom, we're celebrating Black freedom, is financial freedom, right? I think this is a big conversation that's popped up recently, thinking about what it means for people to be financially independent and free. And specifically for Black women, this is a huge topic of conversation. So I'm just wondering what the future of financial freedom for Black women and Black people in general in Delaware, and more broadly looks like, and what that means to you, and what we can do moving forward with that.
Sure. A financial freedom obviously means different things to different people. You know, the one thing I try to really focus on is this notion of options, right? I mean, you know, there are people who have decided to sell everything and move into a van and cross the country, and to them, that is freedom. You know, that's not going to be for everybody. So in the main, I believe that employment leads to financial freedom, or is a big step toward financial freedom. And I think that there's a need to upskill and to rethink what career path that we want to go in. I mentioned the trades. Again, these are traditionally male careers that pay very, very well. And I think women need to consider those as options to begin to scaffold themselves into financial freedom. So, you know, I grew up with middle class values. You know, once upon a time, everybody, you know, wanted the picket fence, the house, then it was the mini mansion. And so now I think people are stepping back. I think the pandemic has also been an opportunity for people to step back and really evaluate what it is that they want, what it is that financial freedom means to them. But again, not everybody has options. So to me, having options is the goal. And to do that, you need some skill, some talent, some trade that you can utilize to make an income, whether it's a small income or large income. You know, it depends on your values, but you know, having options is in many ways freedom.
So if I could just jump in there, Karryl, you're talking about trades. And when you see the lack of skilled workers in the trades, it seems the obvious option. I love the idea of options, which pre-pandemic, it felt, and I'm by no means an expert, but it felt as if we were trying to move workers into the technology age, and that was very focused on the fact that, you know, what used to be an assembly line, you had to be a very, very adept technology worker. And so, you know, are there two paths? Like, how do you think about it in your role as the state of, you know, of those options, and maybe where you're prioritizing state funds?
So we have, you know, we as a state administer, you know, 21 different funds, and we have some state funds that provide job training and job services for individuals across the state. And so we have a number of priorities, and a lot of our populations are served in different federal grants. So, you know, in many ways, they're targeted to specific groups. But, you know, we like to take opportunities to braid funding so that we can create individualized career paths for people who are looking to change careers. So, you know, on your question, there are, you know, Delaware has invested through the CARES dollars, $16 million in job training and upskilling for people who were impacted by COVID. We targeted 5 specific areas: construction trades, hospitality, IT, logistics. You know, we targeted these areas and infused the $16 million with providers or training providers across the state so that individuals who were displaced could get that training at no cost to them, so they could upskill and be ready once the pandemic was over. So, you know, that is just one piece. We believe that we will get more dollars for training through the ARC funds that were passed by Congress, and perhaps some remaining CARES dollars that are out there. So we still continue to focus on those priority industries here in Delaware, as well as look at things like manufacturing, you know, some of the emerging career paths that are out there. And so we're trying to do a deep dive. We work closely with the Delaware Workforce Development Board to sort of anticipate what kinds of what types of skills they need in their employees, and we want to align more closely with them so that we're preparing people to be able to walk in those jobs with whatever credential or training that they need.
Yeah, I'm loving the idea of bringing financial freedom through access. I think that that's a really cool initiative that you guys are really pushing in the Department of Labor. Can you tell me a little bit what that means to you? Because that seems like something to celebrate in and of itself.
You mean access?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, we want to make sure that people who are interested, and, you know, often we have an eligibility criteria. And then, you know, there's still funds that are available, even if they're not deep dive. We have individuals that we've paid college tuition for, and then we have individuals that we've paid for barbering school. It just, a lot of it depends on the individual's interests. We do a lot of assessments here when we first begin to work with people to figure out what their skills and talents and interests are. And then we can design programs according to their needs and career goals. So, you know, we want individuals to be able to have access to these training dollars and careers. I often hear that, you know, sometimes our clients will tell us, you know, you guys are the best kept secret. Well, that's not good. We're now trying to get the word out about these dollars that are out there to help people upskill and you know, launch into a new and different and more sustainable career. And I think that, you know, that's one thing that the pandemic, you know, really kind of showed individuals, I think, is that how fragile they are in some of these jobs, and that they need to really kind of take control of their careers and develop a plan to move to the next level. So the department, you know, is open and willing to help all who are looking to upskill and look for a new career. That doesn't necessarily mean college. It doesn't necessarily mean a trade. It could be a certificate, an IT certificate that you know, launches someone into a, you know, $50,000, $60,000 career after a few months. So you know, opportunities are out there.
You know what I really like about that, Karryl, as well, is that you're talking about more than the tactical training. And you know, this is a topic that's near and dear to our heart, but it's about you know, it's about clarity of vision. It's about thinking about the next step, and it's not something that employees generally may do in the course of their day. It would be come in and get the job done and do it well. And then and women especially, and then someone will say to me, wow, you're doing such a great job. So how about this? But, you know, you've described your own career, and you're talking to your clients now about thinking big picture. And I guess we're all looking for good to come out of the pandemic, but it's been a reset on so many levels of how we live our lives or think about our future. Just interesting. I hadn't thought about it, where I think your everyday is we need these funds and we need this training. We're going to get people in those seats. but it's about more than that.
Oh, yeah. It obviously, getting a job is, it's our job to get people work, right? We connect employers to employees. We have we have staff on board who work specifically with the employer community to find out, what are the jobs, where are they? We can help them create, we can do a job fair on their behalf. We can recruit on their behalf. We can work up job specs for them because we see ourselves as a balance. We serve the employee, the employer, and the job seeker. So we take that role very seriously. It is a balance. We want livable wages for employees. That's our goal. It just helps our economy. It helps sustain people. It's more satisfying. But we know, 90% of businesses in Delaware are small businesses, and they are very, what's the word? They're very, the wages that they pay employees is very critical, when you're starting a new business. And so, it's not expected that, you'll get top dollar when you're just starting a new business because the business owner is struggling to make ends meet. But at the same time, employees need a living wage and they have to attract good people by paying a decent wage. So that's kind of the ongoing struggle I think that we're going to come out of the pandemic with. What is the level of compensation that is needed to draw the best employees you can?
And I'm going to ask one more question, then Gabby, I promise we get back in, because I also think that I'd be interested to know how you think about it at a state level versus what Congresswoman Blunt Rochester is doing in Washington in the Future of Work caucus. Are there similarities, or is there something very distinct about the state level as you think about that future of work?
We have the distinct advantage of having had Congressman Blunt Rochester as a former cabinet secretary here at Department of Labor. So, she is, we feel one of us here, right? She is very much a part of our past and our present, clearly. And we've worked with her on a number of initiatives. I recently spoke at a Future of Work caucus meeting, talking about some of the things we've done here in Delaware. And, we often talk, we'll talk to her about some of the impacts of federal programs on Delaware to help shape and form her, her role on the committee, in terms of legislation. So, we feel like we have an opportunity to work very closely with her. Now, in many ways, we are the manifestation of what they want at the federal level. So I would say we're pretty much in lockstep. States are given flexibility to do a lot of their own programming, but most of our dollars for employment and training flow from the federal government. So we're very connected with federal programs.
Yeah, I think it's so awesome also just to think about the way that even initially your mom pushed you into that one summer job in policy, and now you're helping others achieve their own goals with their work goals. I think that's really awesome. But something I definitely really wanted to ask is what organizations do you suggest that people are supporting this weekend, especially in celebration of this holiday? Where would you point your extra dollars for this holiday that was just declared a national holiday?
Yes. On a personal level, I always try to support small African-American business when I can. Our agency, as an agency, we try to get a diverse group of providers to ensure that we're, giving equal opportunity to the small nonprofits and providers, give them an opportunity to compete as well. So, I would suggest that, while people are thinking about Juneteenth and freedom, just this is sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity to take a moment to reflect, and after reflecting, plot out a course for your next steps. In many ways, all bets are off now, right? The pandemic kind of shook up the status quo. So what we've always held on to in the past may no longer be there. So what is it you want to do? Is your career fulfilling? If it's not, call me. I mean, we here at the Department of Labor are ready, willing, and able to help you chart a course to your next and best career. So, if I have any, if that would be my one sales pitch today, is that, I think, there's obviously value in work. People like to be productive. People like to be proud. They like to see the fruit of their labor. And I think oftentimes in some careers, people don't get to see that, or it gets lost. So, take some time out and think about what freedom means to you, what work means to you in that context of freedom. And, just, call on Department of Labor. We may have programs and services that can help you, get the career you love.
Karryl, what a great way to end the webinar on such a high note, especially coming out of a period where there were far more lows. That's really inspiring. I thank you so much. We're grateful for your time here today. And as we said earlier, we're grateful for your work at the Department of Labor and everyone who works at the agency. So thank you again, Gabby. Welcome. We're so glad that you're part of our team, and thank you for joining us today. So with that, we'll wish everyone a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work you do on behalf of women.
And thank you.
Thank you.